They called him dangerous, until her police dog bled to protect her. They whispered behind closed doors, exchanged nervous glances on the sidewalk. That dog's too aggressive. Why would she keep something like that around a child? But Naomi knew better. So did Lena. And so did Valor, the retired K-9, who had once stared down bullets to protect strangers. Now his mission was quieter. Guard a little girl who hadn't spoken a word in over a year. Nobody knew what would come the night fear returned to their doorstep. When shadows crept in through the back gate, and the dangerous dog would prove the only line between a child's silence and her scream. The house on Sycamore Street looked like any other suburban home, on the outside neatly trimmed hedges, wind chimes that sang to passing breezes, and a white porch swing that never creaked. But inside, time seemed to float differently. Lena Brooks sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor of the living room, silently drawing spiral galaxies in looping circles with a purple crayon. Her tiny fingers, smudged with shades of cobalt and indigo, moved with obsessive precision. She didn't look up. She rarely did. Not when the mail arrived. Not when her favorite cartoon hummed in the background. And not even when her mother entered the room with another armful of folders and fatigue carved into her features. Dr. Naomi Brooks, still in her pale green scrubs from the night shift, leaned against the door frame for a moment longer than usual. Her eyes drifted from the galaxy on the floor to the girl drawing it. 5 years old, barely 35 pounds, and yet carrying a silence so heavy it filled every room. Lena hadn't spoken a word in over 3 months. Not since the meltdown at school. Not since the diagnosis of moderate to severe autism. Not since the world decided it was too loud, too unpredictable for her daughter to feel safe in. Naomi dropped the folders onto the kitchen counter with a sigh that echoed through the walls. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was clinical, surgical. It sliced through her routines with brutal clarity. Each day she operated on children's hearts, wiring their lifelines back together. But at home, she couldn't even reach her own daughters. "Lunch soon," Naomi said gently, more out of habit than expectation. Lena didn't respond. She was now shading the outer rings of her galaxy, tongue tucked between her lips, entirely immersed in a place far beyond this house. Naomi walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge, where everything was organized by label Lena's sensory-friendly meals on the top shelf, grouped by color and texture. No surprises, no sauces, no touching foods. While the microwave hummed and reheated another beige meal, Naomi rested her head against the cabinet. It had been one of those weeks again. 4 back-to-back surgeries, 1 child lost on the table, and an onslaught of emails from specialists reminding her that Lena's development was non-progressive and atypical. She didn't need the reminder. Every evening was a quiet return to the house of unsaid things. As Naomi placed the plate near Lena on a small, separate plastic table, careful not to touch the paper galaxy, she noticed a new addition. 6 green dots, perfectly spaced at the corners of the spiral. Lena's version of order, of grounding. Naomi didn't dare comment. The last time she tried to talk about the drawings, Lena had crumpled the page and hidden under the table for 20 minutes. The sun shifted in the sky. Shadows from the blinds drew zebra stripes across the room. Outside, the world continued. Neighbors mowing lawns, birds gossiping on power lines, but inside it was like watching a planet suspended in a vacuum. Later that afternoon, Naomi sat at her desk reviewing patient charts, but her eyes kept drifting back to the living room monitor. Lena was lying on her stomach now, arranging crayons into rows by color, red to violet, then back again. Her movements were calm, methodical, but Naomi knew they were also the tremors of an inner world she couldn't see. The phone rang. It was June, their part-time housekeeper, confirming she'd arrive early tomorrow. Naomi appreciated the help, but even June's presence seemed to bend around Lena's silence. That evening, Naomi tried again. "Lena," she said, kneeling by her side, "do you want to go to the park tomorrow?" No reply, just the sound of crayons tapping in sequence. Tap, 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 pause. Naomi waited, but the response never came. Her hands itched to reach out, to bridge the chasm with a touch, but she'd learned not to. Not yet. Not until Lena invited it. As bedtime approached, Naomi watched her daughter fall asleep surrounded by paper galaxies. Her small chest rose and fell beneath a blanket embroidered with stars, worn soft from countless washes. Naomi stayed a moment longer than necessary, listening to the quiet rhythm of Lena's breath. There was something about watching her sleep that brought Naomi both comfort and despair. A reminder that her child was whole and alive, yet somehow just out of reach. Downstairs, Naomi stood by the kitchen window, staring into the dark yard. The feeling crept in again, that aching loneliness that no amount of medical training could dissect. She didn't need a partner. She didn't need another therapist's opinion. She needed something else. Or maybe someone who wouldn't flinch at the silence. Someone who had seen trauma and survived it. Someone who could sit next to Lena and not ask anything in return. The microwave's clock blinked 9:07 p.m. An idea surfaced. Sudden, unformed, strange. There's that K9 rehabilitation facility near the city. The one the vet tech mentioned in passing. She'd dismissed it before. But now, she wasn't sure. Naomi pressed her palm to the glass window. Her breath fogged the surface slightly. Maybe tomorrow. She didn't know that in a few short days, her daughter's silence would meet another silence, one with a heartbeat and a scarred past, and something wordless, yet profoundly healing, would begin. The fluorescent lights inside the K9 Rehabilitation Center buzzed faintly, casting a pale, cold hue across the kennel aisles. The space was sterile, too clean to feel comforting, too silent to feel alive. Rows of metal gates lined the corridor, each one holding a life once called a hero. Dogs who had served, fought, protected. Dogs with medals. And now, with scars. In the third kennel from the far end, a German shepherd lay with his back pressed to the wall, unmoving. His nameplate read, "Valor, Unit 2137, retired." But he didn't answer to it anymore. Valor's once proud frame had thinned. His coat, though still thick and dark, had lost its sheen. A faint white scar ran across the bridge of his muzzle, old but not forgotten. His amber eyes were open but fixed, locked onto a patch of peeling paint on the opposite wall. He had been watching it for nearly 20 minutes without blinking. The handlers had grown used to this. "He's still doing it again," one of them muttered from behind the desk at the far end, sipping lukewarm coffee. "Just stares like the whole damn world's gone quiet inside him. He doesn't bark, doesn't whine, barely eats unless someone hand-feeds him," another added, not unkindly. "Some of the dogs don't even approach his gate anymore. It's like they know." They did know. Dogs always do. Valor hadn't growled in weeks, but there was something in the silence around him, thick, heavy, magnetic. A grief that bled through the steel bars without making a sound. Dogs in the adjacent kennels would shuffle away during the night, as if instinctively giving him space, like mourners avoiding the grieving. He had once led SWAT entries, tracked down abducted children through city drains, stood between his handler and a shotgun blast that should have killed him. But the last mission, that had broken something that no bullet could reach. They never talked about the mission, not out loud. But word spread quickly in the circles that handled dogs like him. A hostage situation, a breach gone wrong, a flashbang thrown too close, the screams of a child, the scent of blood, and above it all, the sound of his handler's voice screaming his name before being silenced by a blast. They said Valor didn't move for hours after, even after the chaos ended, even after the child was rescued. He had sat beside the body of his partner, unmoving, even as officers tried to pull him away. He had refused water, refused food. They tranquilized him to transport him here. And now he was just here. No mission, no leash, no voice calling his name, just the hum of overhead lights and the slow rot of forgotten glory. The facility director, a former K-9 officer herself, stood quietly outside his kennel. She watched him for a long time before she spoke. He's not aggressive. He's not dangerous. He's just grieving. And no one knows what to do with a grieving dog. The volunteer beside her, a young woman in veterinary school, frowned. Do they feel it like we do? Loss? The director looked at Valor. His ears twitched at a distant bark, but he didn't turn his head. No, she said softly. They feel it deeper, because they don't have words for it. Later that night, after the lights dimmed and the corridors emptied of chatter and bootsteps, Valor rose. It was slow, stiff, like moving through wet cement. He padded to the front of the kennel, not to greet anyone. There was no one there, but as if pulled by some memory buried deep in muscle and marrow. He pressed his nose against the gate, not to push, not to sniff, just to feel something cold, something real. In the silence, he let out a breath so quiet it was almost mistaken for wind. Somewhere down the hall another dog barked in its sleep, a muffled yip, perhaps dreaming of a chase. Valor didn't react, but his ears slowly tilted forward, just a bit. A sound, not loud, but different. Footsteps, not the heavy ones of guards or the click of rubber soles. These were light, hesitant, almost unfamiliar. He didn't know that a woman had just walked into the lobby of the facility, holding a worn envelope and a deep, unreadable ache in her eyes. He didn't know that the name on that paper had once been typed on a discharge file labeled "Not Adoptable." All he knew was that something had shifted in the air. Valor backed up and returned to the wall. But for the first time in many nights, he didn't stare at it. He closed his eyes, and somewhere in the deep, frayed layers of his broken instincts, a thread remained intact. Not quite hope, not quite trust, but something like breath after drowning. Naomi Reyes hadn't meant to be there. Her shift at the hospital had been canceled, last-minute emergency plumbing failure in the pediatric OR. Most would have taken that as a sign to go home, rest, breathe. But Naomi didn't know how to sit still anymore. Not since the diagnosis. Not since Lena stopped speaking. Her 5-year-old daughter, so full of movement and wild hums, had simply withdrawn, as if a part of her had been swallowed by something too large for a child to name. So, Naomi drove. She didn't know where, not at first. The roads pulled her like quiet currents, and somehow they led her here, past the concrete sign that read K-9 Rehabilitation and Transition Facility. She parked. She stared. And then, without even understanding why, She stepped inside. The woman at the front desk looked up, surprised. Visitors weren't common. "Can I help you?" she asked gently, noticing the tension in Naomi's shoulders. "I'm just looking," Naomi replied, her voice hoarse from disuse. The front desk woman hesitated. "For adoption?" Naomi didn't answer. A moment passed. Then the woman gestured toward the corridor. "Take your time. Most of them are behind glass. You can observe." And so Naomi walked. The corridor was silent but alive, air thick with the quiet ache of stories that no one told aloud. She passed kennels where dogs stirred, sniffed the air, lifted their heads at her presence. Some wagged slowly. Others didn't bother. Then she reached him. Third kennel from the end. He didn't move. Didn't even seem to notice her. A German shepherd with battle in his bones and exhaustion in his eyes. He sat like stone back against the far wall, his gaze fixed just slightly to the left of her. But as Naomi lingered, something changed. It wasn't dramatic. No bark, no tail wag, no leap to the glass like other dogs sometimes did. Just his eyes. He looked at her. Not at her clothes or her hand or the spot where a treat might be. At her. Naomi froze. Her breath hitched unexpectedly, and she found herself blinking against a pressure behind her eyes she hadn't felt in weeks. It wasn't just that he saw her. It was that he saw through her. Like he knew what it meant to keep breathing when your world had gone quiet. Like he had heard silence the same way Lena had, felt it closing in like water. She stepped closer, pressed her palm gently against the glass. The dog didn't move, but he didn't look away. There was no logic in what happened next, no checklist, no rational processing, only a quiet voice inside her that said, "It's him." "You want valor?" the facility director repeated, looking more than a little surprised. Naomi nodded slowly. They stood in the small conference room behind the front lobby, a clipboard and waiver forms between them. "He's not your typical adoption case," the woman said carefully. "He was retired after a field incident, PTSD, doesn't engage well, doesn't respond to commands anymore, doesn't bond." Naomi said nothing. "People have tried," the director added, almost apologetically. "Trainers, former handlers. He won't work. He doesn't want to." "I'm not trying to make him work," Naomi replied. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. The director studied her. "Forgive me, but may I ask why? Why him?" Naomi's hands tightened on the clipboard. "Because," she said, "I have a little girl who hasn't spoken in 6 months, who won't look anyone in the eyes, who sleeps with her face to the wall, as if the world behind her is just too loud to bear." She swallowed. "And that dog looked at me like he understood." The room went quiet. Then the director said, more softly, "They discharged him with a black mark. Said he was no longer reliable in the field. Said he froze." Naomi nodded once. "So did my daughter." That evening Naomi returned to the facility. Not in scrubs this time, but in jeans and a soft beige sweater. A subtle tremor threaded through her hands as she signed the final paperwork. As she approached the kennel again, the other dogs stirred. A few barked. One pawed at the glass, but Valor didn't move. Naomi crouched, level with him, separated by just one thin pane of acrylic. "I'm not going to rush you," she whispered. "But if you come with me, you won't be alone anymore." Valor blinked. His ears twitched once. That was all. And yet Naomi understood. Some things didn't need grand gestures. Some things began with a glance. The front gate creaked open, slow and hesitant, as if echoing the uncertainty that clung to the air. Naomi parked the car in the driveway of the modest suburban home nestled beneath two aging elms. Spring light spilled through the leaves in fractured patches, painting the lawn in shifting gold. The trunk shut softly behind her, but Valor didn't move. He sat in the back seat, head low, eyes distant. Not alert, not curious, just there. Naomi opened the door and crouched beside him, leash in hand but unused. She didn't tug, didn't coax, only waited. After a long, silent minute, Valor stepped down onto the gravel with the gravity of a soldier walking into a battlefield he never asked to return to. Inside, the house was still. Too still. The kind of stillness that isn't peace, but absence. Lena was somewhere upstairs. Naomi had left her with June, their longtime housekeeper, before rushing to the hospital for the now canceled surgery. A quiet routine they'd all grown used to. Naomi working, June watching over Lena, and Lena existing in her room, in her own unreachable world. As Naomi guided Valor inside, his nails clicked softly against the wooden floor. Every sound echoed louder than it should have. June appeared at the base of the staircase, drying her hands with a dish towel. Her eyes dropped immediately to the dog. She stiffened. "That's him?" Naomi nodded. "His name's Valor." June looked at the dog for a long time. "Big, real big." "He's gentle," Naomi said, though she didn't know if it was true yet. The housekeeper's mouth pressed into a line. "I'll keep Lena upstairs for a while, just until he settles." Naomi wanted to say that Lena wouldn't go near him anyway, but she only nodded. The rumors began the same afternoon. Mrs. Cardenas, from 2 houses down, slowed conspicuously during her walk. Mr. Weaver next door leaned over his hedge, phone in hand, recording the barest movement of the German shepherd through the living room window. The story morphed quickly. "That's the dog that bit his handler. He went rogue during a mission. I heard he was put down, but they covered it up. They're letting dangerous animals live with kids now." Naomi closed the blinds. She didn't have the energy to explain what most people couldn't comprehend, that broken didn't mean dangerous, that silence didn't mean empty, that healing didn't look the same for everyone, especially not for Valor. He didn't touch the food the first night. Naomi left the bowl in the corner of the kitchen, stainless steel, and filled with premium kibble softened by broth. She'd done her research, knew that some dogs, especially those with PTSD, needed time. She waited. He sniffed it once, then returned to the far wall of the living room and lay down with a groan that sounded more human than canine. June swept around him with deliberate distance, eyes wary. The mop changed directions whenever it came too close. She didn't complain, but Naomi saw the edge in her movements. The unspoken warning, "This isn't normal." She didn't argue. The second night passed the same way. The bowl remained full. Valor didn't bark, didn't explore, didn't claim territory like most dogs might. He simply existed in the quiet, like a ghost not sure if it was allowed to haunt again. Naomi sat near him once after Lena had gone to bed, a gentle attempt at proximity. She didn't reach out. She just sat. He didn't move toward her, but he didn't move away either. That, she figured, was enough for now. Lena watched from the stairs. She didn't come down, not even when June offered her favorite blanket. But she peeked between the rails, her small face half shadowed by the dim hallway light. Valor didn't notice her. Or maybe he did, but gave her space in the same way he gave everyone space, like the world had taught him it was safer to be invisible. Naomi saw Lena watching, saw the way her daughter's fingers curled around the railing. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Naomi's heart cracked a little more. Still, she didn't push. She'd learned not to. On the third morning, Naomi stepped into the kitchen and froze. The bowl was empty, clean. Valor stood near the window, staring at the trees with eyes that were still tired, but not vacant. Naomi didn't speak. She simply walked over, picked up the bowl, and gave him a nod. And in the faintest flicker of movement, barely visible unless you were looking for it, his tail twitched. The house slept under a sky bruised in midnight blue. A light rain tapped the roof, a lullaby in minor key. Naomi had retreated to her room hours ago, exhaustion dragging her into dreamless rest. The walls held their silence like breath, but in the living room the storm was already brewing. Valor's legs twitched, first one, then the other. He lay sprawled by the far couch, head nestled between his paws, but his breathing no longer matched the rhythm of sleep. It quickened, shallow. The air around him thickened, invisible yet heavy, like the charged quiet before an explosion. Then it hit. A low, muffled growl escaped his throat. His body jerked once, then again, and in the cavern of his mind, the warehouse came alive. The door had been ajar. Unusual. Too quiet. He had moved in first. No hesitation, no leash. They trusted him. He was point. The handler behind him, voice sharp through the earpiece. "Sweep left. Gunfire last seen behind crate rows." Dust, metal, blood already in the air. Valor's paws hit the concrete fast and precise. His ears caught the shuffle before the shot. Bang! Searing pain in the flank. Yelping, falling, chaos. The handler screamed his name. The shouting grew distant, muffled. The world spun sideways as Valor crawled behind a forklift, bleeding. Then, footsteps. Not friendly. And someone laughed. Back in the living room, Valor's chest heaved. A whimper pushed through clenched teeth. His jaw moved like biting something that wasn't there. The tip of his tail twitched once, sharply. From the shadows of the hallway, a small figure stood still. Lena. She hadn't made a sound when her eyes opened. She didn't need to. The moment something shifted in the air, she felt it. The tremor of unease that didn't belong to her, but pressed against her skin all the same. Barefoot, she stepped out of her room. The dog was shaking. Not like cold. Like something inside him was breaking again. She didn't call for Mom. Didn't make a move forward. She just stood there, small and solemn in her blue pajamas with the stitched crescent moon. Hair mussed, fingers curled lightly into the sleeve of her top. She looked at him the way children do, without judgment, without assumption. Just seeing. Valor let out a yelp, not loud, but sharp enough to snap something loose in the quiet. His eyes flew open. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The ceiling wasn't metal. The air didn't smell like gunpowder. His side didn't burn. But his heart thundered, legs twitching with the residue of instinct. Run, fight, survive. His eyes darted to the left, then froze. A pair of eyes, not aggressive, not pitying, just watching. The little girl. She didn't flinch when their eyes met, didn't run or call out or ask if he was okay. She just stood there. Valor blinked. His breathing slowed, his head lowered slightly, not submission, something gentler, an acknowledgement. Lena tilted her head just a little, like she understood, like the storm in him was somehow familiar. And after a long minute of silence, so fragile it could have shattered with a whisper, she turned, walked back to her room, didn't say a word, didn't close the door. When Naomi came downstairs the next morning, she found Valor curled in a different place, closer to the hallway. A soft blanket had been dragged halfway off the couch, lying near him like an offering. She didn't ask. She just watched him for a moment and quietly whispered, "You're not alone here." The storm rolled in without warning. By 10:42 p.m., rain drummed against the windows like hurried footsteps trying to escape something. Thunder grumbled low across the sky, distant but inching closer. The Brooks house sat still beneath it, as if bracing. Most of the lights were off. Only the warm amber glow of the floor lamp in the living room remained left on, in case Lena woke up afraid, though lately she hadn't screamed at all. She hadn't said a word either. Not to Naomi, not to the housekeeper June, not even to her therapist. But something in her had changed, and tonight that something moved her from her bed to the hallway. Quietly, gently, like following an invisible thread. Valor lay on the rug, chest pressed to the floor, eyes half closed but not asleep. His ears flicked once at the sound of thunder, then stilled. He didn't react to the wind rattling the back gate. He didn't care that the world outside seemed to be falling apart, because inside he was used to storms, the kind that didn't need rain, the kind that came from within. So he lay there, as he always did, silent, unmoving, not expecting anything from the night. And then he heard her, soft footsteps. Not Naomi's, too light. His ears perked just a little, but he didn't raise his head. The girl. Again. Lena appeared in the hallway, hugging something to her chest. A pale gray blanket. She didn't look at him, didn't say a word. But she walked straight to the couch, paused, then turned and crouched beside the large German shepherd, her knees sinking into the rug. For a moment she just looked at the blanket in her hands. She was trembling, but not with fear, with focus. She reached out, slow, deliberate, and draped the blanket over Valor's back. The dog didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't growl. He just blinked once, as if surprised not by the action, but by the quiet of it, by how gentle it felt. The fabric settled around his shoulders like a memory, warm, soft, human. It didn't make sense, but it didn't need to. Not to him, not to her. Then Lena sat down, right there, on the rug beside him, back straight, knees tucked under her pajama shirt, hands in her lap. She still didn't look at him. She didn't touch him, didn't need to. Her presence said everything, that she'd seen him shaking in his sleep, that she'd heard the thunder and knew it didn't come from the sky alone, that maybe, in her own quiet way, she was scared too. But she was here. She was here. And for the first time in months, Valor shifted. Barely. A sigh escaped his chest. His head lowered to the floor again, but not in defeat, in surrender, not to fear, to calm, to something unfamiliar, but welcome. He exhaled slowly. Lena's eyes remained fixed on the corner of the rug, never meeting his, but her shoulder brushed his fur by accident. She didn't pull away. She just breathed in sync with the storm. And so did he. They sat like that for 20 minutes, no eye contact, no words, only silence and a storm. But in that stillness something changed, not loudly, not suddenly. Just a shift, like a seed sprouting under frost. Something unspoken passed between the broken dog and the quiet girl. And for the first time since arriving at the Brooks home, Valor didn't feel like a ghost passing through someone else's life. He felt present, seen. When Naomi walked into the living room after hearing the thunder, she paused in the doorway. Her breath caught. There they were. Her daughter, who hadn't let anyone hug her in over a year, and the dog, who hadn't let anyone close without flinching, sitting side by side, wrapped in the same silence, connected not by touch or sound, but by something deeper, by pain, by recognition, by healing that didn't need permission. Naomi didn't speak. She stepped back into the hallway, tears silently pricking her eyes. And for the first time since the adoption, she knew she had made the right choice. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a patchwork of soft gold on the living room floor. Lena was already awake. She always was. Never quite slept deeply, not like before. But this morning felt quieter. Not silent in the hollow way, but still like a pond after ripples settle. Naomi watched her daughter from the kitchen doorway, cup of coffee cooling in her hand. The girl sat cross-legged on the rug, a small plastic container of colored wooden shapes balanced on her knees. Squares, triangles, crescents, stars, each in soft pastel tones. Therapy tools, designed to help with motor control and pattern play. Tools that, for weeks, had gone untouched. Until now. Lena picked a yellow triangle, then a purple circle. She placed them on the floor carefully, symmetrically, 3 inches apart. Then a green square. Then she stopped. She glanced to her left. Valor lay nearby, his massive frame stretched out but alert. He hadn't moved much, just his ears twitching slightly, eyes watching, always watching. Lena tilted her head. Then, as if unsure why, she slid a red crescent shape toward him. Naomi held her breath. Valor blinked, stared. Then, slowly, so slowly, Naomi wasn't even sure it was intentional. He extended his paw and nudged the red piece forward. It landed next to the purple circle, perfectly aligned. Lena didn't react, not outwardly. But she picked up another shape, a blue star. She slid it closer to Valor. He looked at her hand, not the toy, the hand, waited. Then gently used his nose to bump the star into place. Not random, not play, precision. Like he understood, like he remembered training. Naomi's heart knocked against her ribs. She set her mug down on the counter silently, carefully, and stepped into the hallway to watch without being seen. Lena's world was rarely shared. She lived inside colors and shadows and movement most people couldn't understand. Her therapist said it wasn't about logic. It was about patterns, safe repetitions, trust in what wouldn't change. And Valor, he moved like he understood rules she hadn't spoken. He didn't bark, didn't crowd her, didn't push for affection. He just mirrored. Lena lined up 5 shapes in a curve. Valor waited until she stopped moving, then used his nose to nudge a 6th piece into position. The same curve, same spacing. Naomi felt something bloom in her chest. It wasn't joy, not yet. It was recognition, like witnessing a foreign language spoken fluently for the first time. They weren't playing, they were speaking, with plastic shapes, with eyes, with silence. After 10 minutes, Lena stood up. She didn't look at Valor. She didn't need to. She simply brushed her palms against her pajama pants and walked down the hall, past Naomi, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But Naomi saw it, the looseness in her daughter's shoulders, the way her eyes didn't dart to the floor. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lena wasn't retreating. She was inviting, in her own quiet way. Naomi turned back to the living room. Valor had not moved. He remained in position beside the small mosaic of shapes, his paw resting near the red crescent. His eyes met Naomi's. No wag of the tail, no sound. Just that steady, amber gaze. It said, "I didn't break her world. I entered it." Naomi sank slowly to the couch, emotion tightening her throat. She whispered, mostly to herself, "What are you, Valor?" But deep down, she already knew. He wasn't just a retired canine. He wasn't a project or a risk or a burden. He was a bridge. And for a child trapped inside her own patterns, that meant everything. The air was crisp with the scent of early spring. Light filtered through the budding branches, dappling the sidewalk in patches of soft green and gold. The park was quiet, just the way Naomi liked it. Morning hours meant fewer people, fewer questions, fewer sidelong glances. She glanced down. Lena walked beside her, small hand loosely clutching the hem of Naomi's jacket, eyes wide, scanning everything, never quite still, but not afraid, not frozen. That was new. A few paces ahead, Valor padded silently, head low, tail neutral, not pulling, not straying, just present. He had taken to this routine quickly, guarding without imposing, leading without demanding. Every morning, Naomi took them on this loop around the park trails, hoping that somehow the rhythm of nature might loosen something inside her daughter. Today felt different, not dramatic, just charged. They stopped near the duck pond, a shaded bench, patches of moss underfoot, the distant hum of a lawnmower in the far fields. Naomi sat. Lina stood still. Valor settled by her feet, his body curling in a half-moon, ears flicking to distant sounds, always alert, always aware. And then it happened. A bark, high-pitched, erratic. From behind a hedge, a terrier came barreling out off leash, fur matted with burrs, tongue lolling, excited beyond logic. Naomi didn't have time to react, but Valor did. In one motion, he was on his feet, silent, fast, and still somehow gentle. He positioned his body directly in front of Lena, forming a living wall. No growl, no bark, just stance. His head low, muscles ready. The terrier skidded to a confused halt a few feet away, yipping once before circling and darting off in another direction. The entire moment had lasted maybe 6 seconds. But everything shifted. Lena didn't scream, she didn't bolt, she didn't shut down. Instead, she just stood there, eyes wide, heart hammering beneath her little chest. Naomi held her breath. Valor hadn't moved, still in position, still shielding. And then Lena stepped forward. She raised one hand, slowly, uncertainly, and placed it deliberately on Valor's shoulder. Not a pat, not a test, just contact. Her fingers were small against his thick coat, but her touch was steady. She left her hand there. A moment passed, then another, and another. Valor didn't move, didn't shift, just let her be. From the bench, Naomi felt her heart break and mend all at once. Tears prickled behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. This was not a moment to cry over. This was sacred. It wasn't about the touch, it was about what it meant. Lena had chosen, on her terms, in her time, without pressure, without prompting. She had reached through the fog, and Valor had been waiting. After a minute, Lena knelt down beside him. She didn't speak, She never did in public, but she leaned against his side, her head gently resting on his fur. And Valor, God bless him, turned his head just slightly, nose brushing her temple. Not affection, acknowledgement, like a soldier nodding to another. When Naomi finally stood, her knees were weak. She knew no one else in the park had noticed. No cameras, no witnesses. But this moment would live forever in her bones. Her daughter, who once flinched at wind chimes, had just leaned into a 90-pound working dog like he was an extension of her body, like safety had shape, and smell, and heartbeat. They walked home in silence, but something unspoken pulsed between them, a language beyond words, built not with sentences, but with instincts and trust. The therapy room always smelled like lavender and dry erase markers. Sunlight pooled in soft patches across the playmats, drifting through gauzy curtains. It was designed to feel safe, gentle, controlled. But for Naomi Brooks, no room felt safe unless her daughter could speak in it. It had been 6 months. 6 months since Lena's voice had gone silent, since grief and overwhelm swallowed her language like a rising tide. Not even the specialists knew how to name it precisely. Was it selective mutism? PTSD? Autism shutdown response? All Naomi knew was this. Her daughter had once sung lullabies to her stuffed rabbit. Now she hadn't said a single word, until today. Lena sat cross-legged on the floor, crayons strewn around her like tiny pastel soldiers. Her fingers moved with mechanical calm, coloring in long, looping shapes that resembled waves' soft arcs in blues and purples. Across from her, Valerie Chang, the speech therapist, kept her voice low and rhythmic. No questions, just presence. Valor lay nearby. The big German shepherd had become a fixture now, accepted by the staff with only mild hesitation. He never barked, never interfered. But today, he rested his chin on his paws, just inches from Lena's mat, eyes flicking occasionally to her hands as they worked. Naomi sat on the edge of the room, barely breathing. "Would you like the green next?" Valerie asked softly. Lena didn't answer, but her hand paused, hovering over the box. Valor shifted, just slightly. His ear twitched, nothing more. And that's when it happened. Lena didn't look up, didn't change her posture. She simply reached out, one small hand, fingers trembling slightly, and brushed her fingertips against Valor's shoulder. The movement was light, tentative. Then, a whisper. So quiet it could have been the wind. So soft Naomi almost doubted her own ears. But she heard it. And so did Valerie. "Good boy." 2 syllables, barely audible, but perfectly clear. Valerie froze. Her clipboard slid from her lap and landed with a dull thud on the carpet. Her hands flew to her mouth, eyes wide, suddenly wet. Naomi didn't move. She couldn't. The moment felt too fragile, like a bubble that might pop if anyone acknowledged it too loudly. Lena kept her eyes on her coloring. Her hand stayed on Valor's fur. The big shepherd didn't react, didn't move a muscle, except for the slow, quiet wag of his tail against the mat. 1, 2, 3 soft thumps. Then stillness again. Valerie leaned forward, voice shaking. "Lena, can you say that again?" But Lena didn't. She didn't need to. Because once was enough. That whisper had cracked open something sacred. Naomi stood only when she was sure her knees would hold. She crossed the room in 2 silent steps, crouched beside her daughter, and placed a hand gently on Lena's back. Lena didn't flinch, didn't pull away. She just kept coloring, calm, steady, as if whispering to a dog was the most natural thing in the world, as if 6 months of silence had just been a pause, waiting for the right moment to breathe again. Naomi looked to Valor. He didn't look back, but his body had relaxed, tail still, ears alert. His presence filled the room like a balm. Not a service dog, not a patient, just an anchor. Later, Valerie stepped out into the hallway and wept. Not from grief, but from release. It wasn't just a phrase. It was a beginning, a whisper that held hope, a voice reborn not through therapy or intervention, but through connection. That night, Naomi replayed the moment in her head again and again. Lena's voice, small but steady. The way Valor hadn't moved, hadn't flinched, just accepted the gift of trust with quiet dignity. She watched as Lena fell asleep on the couch, curled beside the dog like a child beside an old guardian. And for the first time in months, Naomi allowed herself a thought she'd buried deep. Maybe she's coming back to me. Not all at once, not with speeches or milestones, but with moments and murmurs and a single sacred phrase. Good boy. The invitation wasn't a request, it was a summons. Folded neatly into Naomi's mailbox, the note bore no greeting, no warmth. Just a line of typed text and a time. Community Safety Committee meeting, Friday at 6 p.m., attendance expected. Concern, dangerous canine presence. Naomi didn't need to guess who the dangerous canine was. That evening, the community hall's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a cold, bluish tint on every anxious face. Folding chairs were arranged in a semicircle, like a jury box, all facing forward. Naomi sat in the middle, palms flat on her lap. Composed. Outside, Valor waited in the car, his head resting on the window ledge. Inside, judgment had taken its seat. Barbara Landry, HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood moral compass, cleared her throat and stood. She wore a pressed mauve cardigan and a pinched expression like she hadn't exhaled since the Reagan administration. "We're all here," she began, voice measured, "because we value the safety of our children." Nods all around, some emphatic, some hesitant. Barbara continued, glancing at Naomi like someone peeking at a snake behind glass. "And when there's uncertainty about the presence of a trained attack dog in a residential community, particularly near children, it is our responsibility to address it." Naomi didn't move. Her jaw was tight, but her gaze steady. "His name is Valor," she said quietly. A pause. "He's a retired police canine, not an attack dog." Murmurs rippled through the room. From the back, a man in a polo shirt leaned forward. Kevin Samuel's father of twin boys, proud of his lawn, terrified of lawsuits. "With respect," he said, "my wife saw that dog freeze like he was going to pounce when a kid rode by on a scooter. You can't expect us not to be concerned." Barbara jumped in quickly, sensing momentum. "No one is saying you're a bad mother, Naomi. We all know. Well, we all respect what your daughter's been through. But some of us feel that bringing an unstable animal into that situation might be ill-advised." "Unstable?" Naomi echoed. "Yes," Barbara replied. "A dog trained to bite, trained to take down criminals. I mean, what if he gets triggered by a child's scream or a firework? What if he thinks someone's a threat, and, God forbid, he acts on it? Naomi's fingers tightened on her knees. Her heart beat louder than the hum of the lights. She knew what this was. Not a conversation. A quiet trial. They weren't asking. They were warning. She took a breath. Slow. Controlled. Valor has PTSD, she said. Yes, so does my daughter. They understand each other in ways none of us ever will. Another pause. She let it hang in the air like a challenge. I've done the research. He's retired, certified as non-aggressive, and evaluated weekly. He doesn't bark, doesn't bite, doesn't even approach unless invited. He hasn't harmed a soul. Can you say the same about every person in this room? Gasps. A few sharp inhales. Someone muttered, "That's not fair." Naomi stood. I understand fear. Believe me, I live with it every day. But fear is not a reason to destroy what's healing. Kevin opened his mouth to speak, but didn't. Barbara's lips pressed together in a disapproving line. Naomi gathered her purse. If anyone wants to see for themselves, come to the park. Watch how he walks beside my daughter, how he steps between her and traffic, how he lays down when she cries and doesn't move until she breathes again. She didn't wait for a reply. Outside, the air was damp and cool. As she approached the car, Valor lifted his head. His ears perked, tail thumped once. Naomi opened the door. "Let's go home, boy." He climbed into the back seat without a sound, curling into the shape of his own quiet resistance. As she drove past the rows of manicured lawns and tidy fences, Naomi didn't look back at the community hall. She didn't need their approval. She had seen something they hadn't, and one day they would too. The TV flickered in the corner of the room, casting cold blue light across the stained concrete floor. The bar smelled like sweat, fried oil, and something sour that clung to the walls, no matter how many times they mopped it. The kind of place people came to forget themselves, or hide. Calder Voss wasn't drinking tonight, not yet. He sat in a booth at the far end, nursing a chipped mug of coffee, black and burnt. His eyes, sharp and restless, were fixed on the television screen mounted above the bar. The news anchor was mid-sentence, voice neutral and too bright. And after nearly 2 years without speech, little Lena Brooks finally whispered her first words to the family's newly adopted companion, a retired canine officer named Valor. Seen here? The camera cut to a short, clip-shaky footage, likely phone-recorded. A German shepherd sat beside a little girl on a park bench, calm, still, attentive. His fur was darker than the average coat sleek, dense, with a small scar just above his left brow. He didn't move when she placed her hand on his back. He simply looked forward, as if listening to something the world had forgotten how to hear. Calder froze. That scar, that stance, that dog. He didn't blink. The rest of the bar dissolved around him. The noise of clinking glasses and low music dropped into static silence. Valor, formerly in service with the Eastgate Police Department, was honorably discharged last year. He's now living with the Brooks family, under the care of Naomi Brooks, a pediatric nurse at Memorial General. The bond between Lena and Valor has already drawn national attention. Calder's jaw clenched. Valor. They kept the name. He hadn't heard it in months, but it hit him like a slap. A wound that never quite scabbed over. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a half-crushed cigarette, fingers trembling just slightly as he struck the match. The flame danced in his reflection on the bar's window. They'd said the dog was retired. was broken, unfit for duty. Voss had made sure of it, or so he thought. The last time he saw Valor, then labeled K947, the dog was muzzled, sedated, and shoved into a metal crate like cargo, after the warehouse raid, after the accusations. After everything went sideways, they'd called Calder a liability, too aggressive with training, inhumane methods, a review board, a hearing, a quiet dismissal. They'd stripped him of his badge, his unit, and perhaps worst of all, his legacy. But Valor was the one who'd humiliated him. "They turned you into a therapy dog," he muttered, a sneer curling at the edge of his mouth. Pathetic. His eyes narrowed, but he knew that look in Valor's gaze, that unblinking, disciplined focus. That wasn't gone, just buried. Under the right pressure, the right fear, the right scent of adrenaline, Valor would crack. They all did. Calder leaned back in his seat, smoke curling around his face. "Let them parade you around like some miracle mutt," he whispered to the TV. "You're still mine. You remember the voice, the leash, the work, don't you, boy?" He took a long drag and exhaled slow. Hatred was a quiet fire in his chest, steady and patient. In the corner of the screen, Naomi's face appeared next to Lena's, smiling, fragile, happy. Calder tilted his head. So that was the new handler. A nurse, a single mother, civilian. No idea what Valor had been built to do. No idea what buttons to avoid. His thoughts shifted. Something calculating slid into his grin. "Guess it's time for a reunion." He stubbed the cigarette into the coffee saucer, grabbed his coat, and disappeared into the shadows of the lot behind the bar. The door slammed behind him. Outside, the wind carried a low whistle down the alleyway, shrill and sharp, almost like a command. Naomi Brooks stared at the notice in her trembling hand, the ink bleeding slightly where her thumb pressed too hard. The hospital hallway buzzed behind her monitors, beeping, shoes squeaking, someone calling out for an oxygen tank. But Naomi's world had narrowed to 12 neatly typed lines stapled to a manila folder. "Due to recent complaints and safety concerns, we must reevaluate your access to the pediatric ICU while accompanied by the animal in question." She didn't need to finish reading. She already knew what it meant. They were trying to separate her from Valor. "Naomi," a voice came from behind. She turned to see Dr. Renee Halverson approaching, lab coat crisp, hair in its usual tight twist, clipboard held like a gavel. Her mouth pressed into a thin, professional line, but Naomi could see the cracks. They had once been close. Not friends exactly, but allies. Two women in a sea of doubt, trusted by the children too scared to speak, and the parents too exhausted to hope. But something in Renee's eyes had changed over the last few weeks. Ever since the news story aired, ever since Valor's scarred face showed up beside Lena's shy smile. They stepped into the glass-walled office near the nurse's station. Naomi barely had time to sit before Renee shut the door and drew the blinds. "I wanted to tell you in person," Renee said. "There have been concerns." Naomi folded the paper in half, voice low. "About the dog?" "About the optics." Renee tapped her clipboard. "He's a retired canine. He has a documented trauma history. Some parents are worried, some staff too. He growled at a custodian last week." He was startled. The mop bucket slipped behind him. "Naomi," Renee's voice lowered. "I'm not questioning your heart. God knows Lena is doing better than anyone dared hope. But Valor isn't certified as a therapy animal. He's not licensed for pediatric access. Technically, he shouldn't be up there. Naomi stared at her. We've had dogs up there before. Certified dogs, service animals, not former police units with a trigger record. Naomi stood slowly, her pulse in her ears now. He's not a weapon, she said, barely above a whisper. He's a survivor, just like my daughter. Your daughter isn't the issue, Renee replied gently. You are. You're making clinical spaces personal. People are noticing. Naomi blinked, stunned. You think this is about me trying to prove something? I think you're too close to this, Renee said. And I think if you don't make a choice soon, the hospital board will make it for you. A silence fell between them, thick and strange. Outside the window, Naomi could see the pediatric hallway. She knew every tile, every flicker of light, every child's name in every room. She knew which mother hadn't left her son's bedside in 7 days. She knew which nurse was on her 3rd double shift. She knew what it meant to be tired, but to show up anyway. And she knew Valor had saved Lena not just with that one moment in the living room, or at the park, or during therapy, but by being there, by not leaving, by staying when no one else could get close. Naomi looked at Renee. You want me to choose between my daughter's healing and my job? I'm asking you to protect everyone, Renee replied, including yourself. Naomi gathered the notice, folded it into her coat pocket. Then she opened the office door. Her voice, when it came, was steady. Tell the board they can revoke my badge if they want, she said. But Valor stays with Lena, and wherever she's allowed to go, he will be too. Renee looked up, stunned. Naomi? I didn't ask for this story, but I won't apologize for it either. That dog is the reason my daughter spoke again. He's the reason she sleeps through the night, the reason she doesn't flinch when someone raises their voice. Naomi stepped out into the hallway. I'm not giving that up. She walked past the ICU where one little girl sat propped up in bed with a puzzle on her tray. Hi, Ms. Brooks, she said, toothless smile wide. Naomi smiled back. Hey, sweetheart, looking sharp. She kept walking, past the waiting room, past the wall of donor plaques and the sanitized air of respectability. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing into her chest like gravity. But somewhere beneath the fear, there was something else. A fire. Small, but unyielding. When she got home that evening, Valor was curled near the living room window, watching the street in that still, unblinking way of his. Naomi hung up her coat, knelt beside him, and ran her fingers through his fur. He didn't move, but his tail gave one slow thump. She leaned close and whispered, They tried to make me choose, boy, but I didn't. You're not going anywhere. In the hallway behind her, Lena peeked around the corner, silent as ever, but not afraid. Naomi didn't see her smile, but Valor did. And this time, he thumped his tail twice. The kitchen was quiet, except for the slow tick of the clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator. June stood at the sink, scrubbing a plate that had already been cleaned for 5 minutes. Her eyes weren't on the dish. They stared past the window, past the blooming rose bush she'd trimmed last Sunday, toward something far more distant, far more tangled. The phone rang, its shrill tones slicing the silence in half. She dried her hands quickly, hesitated a second, then picked it up. Yes, this is June. The voice on the other end was familiar. Too familiar. Ma. Her chest tightened. Micah? She breathed. His voice was low, like he was speaking from inside a tunnel, or shame. I ain't got much time. They let me call quick, but... Something's happening. June gripped the edge of the counter. What is it? A pause. Then, there's this guy. Calls himself Voss. Said he could help me out with early release. Get me back on my feet. The name fell like a stone in her gut. Calder Voss. The man from the news. The one with the pinched smile and dead eyes. He wants me to do something for him, Ma. Said it's just information. That I'd barely have to do anything, just... Micah's voice dropped. Just get him access, whatever that means. June sat down hard at the kitchen table. Her knees felt weak. Her heart louder than the clock now. Access to what, Micah? He didn't say. Just that someone in that house, the one you work at, that they're hiding something. He said if I help him, I won't have to worry about jail again, that I can start fresh. June closed her eyes. Micah had always been the boy who trusted too easily. He believed second chances were promises, not negotiations. And now, someone had dangled hope like a carrot in front of a drowning man. And all he had to do was betray someone else's home. Her home. Micah, listen to me, she whispered, careful not to let her voice crack. That man is dangerous. He's not trying to help you. He's using you. You understand? He's using your hope like a weapon. I know, Ma. But I got no one else. No one listens. June's fingers dug into the tablecloth. You have me. Silence again. Then, broken, small. I'm sorry, Ma. After the call ended, June sat alone in the kitchen, the plate still damp on the counter. The quiet returned, but it didn't comfort her anymore. It pressed in on her chest. She thought of Lena, the way the girl still wouldn't speak, not really, but how her body had begun to soften. She thought of Valor, the way he watched without blinking, guarded without being violent, broken without being cruel. And she thought of Naomi, a woman trying to raise a daughter in a world that didn't know how to love gently. June had folded their laundry, scrubbed their floors, boiled soup on stormy nights. She had held this family together in small, invisible ways. And now, the weight of betrayal sat heavy in her hands. She walked to the living room where Valor lay curled in the corner near the fireplace, his eyes half-lidded, but never unaware. June paused. I ever tell you my boy used to be afraid of dogs? She asked softly. Valor didn't move, but his ears flicked. Would scream when he saw one, even the little ones. Her voice dipped into memory, till one day he found this mutt with a crooked leg by the tracks. Fed it crackers for weeks. Didn't tell me, of course. He just needed something that wouldn't judge him. She knelt down beside Valor. His breathing remained even, but she saw his eye twitch, like he was reading something beneath her words. I don't know what kind of things they made you do, or what scars they left, but I've been around long enough to know the difference between a dog who bites and a dog who's been taught to bite. She reached forward and for the first time touched his paw. Warm, solid. Later that night, June stood in the hallway staring at the phone in her hand. She could make a call. She could tell Naomi everything, or she could protect her son. It felt like trying to choose between air and water, both necessary, both slipping through her fingers, but something shifted behind her. She turned. Lena stood in the doorway, her small hand holding Valor's collar gently. No words, just presence. And June realized something simple and devastating. This home had given her something too, trust. She walked into the kitchen, pulled out a notepad from the drawer and wrote one name, Calder Voss. She underlined it twice. Then picked up the phone, and dialed a number that hadn't been called in years. "Detective Meeks," she said when the line clicked open. "This is June Patterson. I think I have information you might want to hear. It's about a man named Voss, and something he's trying to get through my son." Valor stirred in the other room, not from sound, but as if he knew somewhere in his bones that the war wasn't over, only changing shape. It started as a subtle shift. One Naomi almost missed. Valor had always been vigilant. That much came with him, like old scars and the shadow of his badge. But lately, something in his posture had changed. Not just alertness, agitation. Every night after Lena went to bed and the house fell into its gentle hush, he began to pace. Back and forth, back and forth. No growling, no barking, just the soft, rhythmic pad of his paws across the hardwood floor, like a pendulum ticking on borrowed time. At first, Naomi chalked it up to habit. Trauma didn't leave in a day or a month. Maybe it never truly left. And Valor, for all his strength, was still unraveling in silence. But on the fifth night, it escalated. The rain tapped lightly against the window pane, a soft percussion that blurred the lines of thought and time. Naomi sat curled on the couch with a book half open on her lap. The lamp beside her flickered gently, throwing gold across the room. Valor had been pacing again for over 30 minutes, his tail low, eyes fixed on nothing she could see. Then suddenly, he stopped, whipped his head toward the back door, and growled, low, measured, as if warning something unseen. Naomi sat up straighter, heart climbing. "Valor?" He didn't turn. His body went rigid, every muscle taut like coiled wire. Then, with a sudden urgency, he lunged toward the door and began to paw at the floor. Not in curiosity, not in play. It was frantic, desperate, digging. "Hey, stop!" Naomi said, rushing over. "There's nothing there!" But he wouldn't stop. His nails scraped at the worn wood just in front of the door frame, ears pinned back, eyes locked on the floor like it was whispering secrets only he could hear. Naomi crouched beside him and gently touched his side. "Valor, it's okay. There's nothing out there. It's just the storm." Still, he didn't look at her, just kept digging. She frowned. "You're spooked," she whispered, almost to herself. "That's all this is. A memory, not a threat." She reached for his collar and tugged gently. "Come on, boy. Leave it." Reluctantly, Valor stopped. But not because he was convinced. His head turned toward her, eyes dark and unsettled. It wasn't fear in them. It was warning. And something colder beneath it. Recognition. That night, Naomi lay in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. Valor slept by the door instead of his usual spot outside Lena's room. Rain still fell, soft, persistent. But Naomi's thoughts were louder than the storm. What had he smelled? What had he heard? Dogs didn't hallucinate. They remembered. They sensed. They warned. But who was she to trust shadows and paw scrapes over facts and silence? At breakfast, Lena placed 3 triangle blocks on the table in front of her, blue, yellow, and green. Valor approached quietly, tail still, then nudged them into a line. Naomi noticed the way his ears kept swiveling. Every sound made him glance toward the door. "Still on edge, huh?" she muttered under her breath. She didn't know what disturbed her more, that Valor was reacting to something she couldn't see, or that she was starting to believe he wasn't wrong. That afternoon, June noticed too. "He's different," she said quietly while washing dishes. "Not scared, just watching something none of us can see. Naomi nodded. I saw him clawing at the floor by the door last night. June turned off the faucet and wiped her hands. My mother used to say when a dog digs where there's no hole, he's trying to tell you something buried ain't gone. Naomi blinked. That's poetic. June's voice dropped. Or prophetic. Later that evening, Naomi stood by the back door alone, a mug of tea in her hand. She stared at the spot Valor had scratched, ran her fingers over the grooves. Just wood. And yet, it felt colder than the rest of the floor. She looked outside through the glass. Rain had stopped, but the yard beyond looked darker than usual. The old fence swayed slightly in the wind, and one board hung loose, like a tooth waiting to fall. She narrowed her eyes. Just weather. Just where? But still, she locked the door. Valor settled near her feet as she turned off the lights and moved toward the hallway, but before she could take more than 2 steps, he stood again, back to the door, ears alert, frozen. Something outside had moved. Naomi didn't see it, but she felt it in her chest, in the air, in the way Valor's breath went silent. She drew in a slow inhale. "You're not just reacting, are you?" she whispered. "You know something's close." Valor didn't blink, didn't move, and Naomi finally, silently, believed him. The unease didn't lift. It sat in the corners of the house now, like fog that wouldn't burn off. And that night, when she turned off all the lights and crawled into bed, she whispered 3 words into the darkness. Keep her safe. From what, she wasn't sure. But Valor, lying at the door, opened one eye, and didn't sleep the rest of the night. It arrived in a plain brown paper bag. June found it on the back steps just after sunrise, the morning air thick with summer humidity. The house was still asleep quiet, except for the muffled rhythm of Valor's paws as he patrolled the hallway, always alert, always watching. She squinted at the package, no name, no label, just a small black dot inked into the folded paper. Her hand hovered over it. She already knew who it was from, and she already hated herself for taking the call. The night before, her phone had buzzed just as she was closing up the laundry room. A number she hadn't seen in years. "Ms. June Holloway?" the voice rasped. She didn't answer. "I know your son's situation," the man continued. Calm, cold. "Probation's a tight leash. It'd be a shame if someone yanked it." Her stomach had dropped. "Help me once," the voice had said, "and he walks free, clean record, no questions, no blood." June had stood in the dark, clutching the phone like it might burn her. "What do you want?" "A favor, small. You won't even have to lie, just feed a dog." Now she opened the bag. Inside, raw meat, pink and dense, wrapped in butcher paper, and a tiny capped vial taped to the side. She pulled it free, turning it in the light. The label was handwritten, just a single word in red marker, tame. Her throat tightened. It wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to put Valor down, quiet him, remove him from the equation. From the kitchen window, June could see the living room couch. Lena was curled there in a nest of fleece and pillows, one arm flopped across Valor's ribs. The girl's face was tucked against the dog's chest, eyes half-lidded with the comfort only children and animals seemed to understand. And Valor? He didn't move. He just let her rest, breathing slow, protective, still. June's hand trembled. She thought of her son Marcus, thought of the way the system chewed him up, thought of second chances, and how they came dressed as devils with handshakes. And then she looked again at Lena, No words, no sound, just a girl who hadn't spoken in months, sleeping against the one soul she trusted. June felt her knees buckle under the weight of it all. "I can't," she whispered. She moved with intention. The meat still cold was wrapped again. This time in double plastic, buried deep in the outside trash bin, hidden beneath layers of old coffee grounds and rotting lettuce. Gone. She scrubbed her hands clean, not just of the smell, but the guilt. When she came back inside, Valor was sitting up now, eyes on her. Not accusing, not relaxed, just knowing, as if he sensed what she'd done and what she almost hadn't. She knelt beside him, one hand hovering near his chest, hesitant. "You're more than they said," she whispered. "You're not just a dog." He blinked slowly, then turned his gaze toward Lena, still fast asleep. No response needed. That afternoon, Calder Voss waited in his car 3 blocks away, watching the house through a cracked windshield. He wore gloves, not for prints, but for control. Control was everything. Precision was everything. When he didn't get the signal, he lit a cigarette with a dead lighter. The flame caught, then died. He tapped the steering wheel, jaw flexing. Maybe the woman was weak. Maybe the dog was stronger than he remembered. Either way, he wasn't done. Back inside, June folded towels in the hallway, watching as Naomi helped Lena with her shoes. She caught herself glancing at Valor more often than usual. She whispered a prayer then, silent but urgent, not for protection, for courage, because she knew now this wasn't about one vial of meat. This was about something darker circling the edges of their lives. And June had made her choice. It was barely past dawn when the call came in. Naomi's phone buzzed against the nightstand, cutting through the thin veil of sleep she hadn't truly surrendered to. She glanced at the screen, St. Augustine Medical, code red. Her heart clenched. She didn't need to listen to the full message. She was already up, scrubs half on, hair pulled back. Emergency cardiac case, pediatric, complex. That meant her. In the kitchen, June poured coffee with one hand while tucking Lena's hair behind her ear with the other. The girl sat silently at the breakfast table, still in her pajama pants, tracing slow spirals on a piece of toast with her fingertip. Valor paced the entryway, not fast but deliberate, ears up, gaze unsettled. He'd been like this since 3 a.m. Naomi entered, zipping up her bag. "June, it's a critical case. They're prepping the OR now. I'll be gone most of the day, maybe overnight." June nodded. "Go. We'll be okay here." Naomi leaned down to press a kiss to Lena's head. The girl didn't flinch this time. Small progress. "I'll call you when I can, honey." Valor stopped pacing. He stood near the door, tail rigid, watching Naomi. "Buddy," she said, kneeling. "Stay. Protect." The dog's eyes flicked to Lena, then to June, then back to Naomi, as if assessing the arrangement, as if weighing something heavier than instinct. He licked Naomi's hand once, then sat down. Outside, thunder rolled far off in the distance, summer storms teasing the horizon. Naomi's car disappeared down the hill. And still, Valor didn't move. By noon, the house was quiet. June hummed softly while folding laundry. Lena played with her colored shapes on the floor, lining up stars and triangles in uneven rows. A breeze rolled in through the open window, carrying the smell of wet pavement and jasmine. Valor sat near the back door, ears twitching every few seconds. His body was still, but the tension in his shoulders said otherwise. He knew something. June noticed the way he would sniff the air, then growl barely audible, like a warning meant more for himself than anyone else. She thought of the meat from last week, the vial, the promise, the regret. She watched Valor now with new eyes. Not as a dog, but as a sentinel. Something had shifted in him. At 2:47 p.m., Naomi's name flashed across the news scroll on the hospital's internal dashboard. Dr. Naomi Brooks, lead cardiothoracic surgeon, 8-year-old in critical cardiac arrest. She'd gone into surgery just after noon. By now, she would be deep into the chest cavity, navigating the arteries of a child's heart like a map of hope drawn in red and silence. Outside, the sky had turned. Rain began to fall. Not heavy, just enough to blur the windows and hush the world. Lena stood by the glass, eyes tracing the droplets, fingers absently tapping Valor's head as he sat beside her. He didn't seem to mind. In fact, he leaned into her touch, ears slowly lowering, the tension in his back slackening, but only slightly. He was listening to more than just the storm. June watched them from the hallway. There was something sacred in that stillness. The child and the dog, each broken in their own way, finding rhythm in one another's silence. But even now, Valor's eyes didn't soften. He wasn't at ease. He was waiting for something or someone. In a sterile room 18 miles away, Naomi stood over a child no older than her daughter, hands steady inside a cavity no bigger than a grapefruit. Monitors beeped, nurses held breath. One slip and the rhythm would vanish. She didn't think of the house, or the dog, or the storm. She thought only of the next stitch, the next beat, the next chance to keep a child alive. Back at home, Valor rose suddenly. No warning, no sound. He moved to the front window, eyes narrowing. His fur lifted just slightly. Then he backed away, not from fear, from restraint. June's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She didn't answer. Outside, a dark sedan rolled slowly past the house. Valor watched every inch of it and growled, this time loud. The wind had picked up. Branches scraped against the side of the house like skeletal fingers. Rain tapped rhythmically on the windows. The storm had settled in, not violent, just steady, like something breathing. Inside, the house was calm. Too calm. June had tucked Lena into her blanket cocoon on the living room couch. The girl had drifted into a light doze. Valor curled beside her, head resting against her legs like a silent vow. June stood in the kitchen rinsing dishes, her mind still restless from the unease earlier. She hadn't told Naomi about the meat, or the man, or the look in Valor's eyes lately, like he was bracing for something no one else could see. And in that moment, everything went dark. A flicker, then silence, then the power cut. June froze. The refrigerator's low hum died. The porch light blinked once, then vanished. Outside, only the storm kept breathing. Valor's ears snapped upright, then he growled, deep, guttural, from the chest. 3 blocks away, Calder Voss smiled. He pressed the final key on the black tablet in his lap. Security grid, bypassed. Beside him in the front seat, a younger man, lean, twitchy, with eyes that wouldn't settle, nodded. Back door? Voss handed him the pry bar. You're up, no mistakes. They moved fast. Rain masked their footsteps as they slipped through the side gate, boots crunching wet leaves. The motion sensors disabled, the cameras blacked out. Naomi had never thought she'd need more than the basic security package. She didn't know Voss still remembered the blueprint of Valor's old world, didn't know he'd made a copy of the dog's chip registration. or that betrayal wears a badge before it ever wears a ski mask. Inside, Valor was already moving. He didn't bark, he didn't whine, he stood, body taut, eyes locked on the back door. June whispered, "What is it, boy?" And then she heard it. The click, the soft mechanical grind of the rear lock being forced open. She reached for her phone dead. No signal. Power loss had cut the router. She turned toward the front Lena, sleeping. June grabbed the nearest object, a fire poker, and backed toward the living room. "Stay," she whispered to Valor. But he didn't. The back door opened half an inch, then 2. A foot slid inside, soft, calculated. Then came the shadow of a hand gloved, reaching for the doorframe. But Valor was already there. He didn't growl. He launched. The impact was savage. Voss's accomplice hadn't even crossed the threshold before Valor collided with him like a battering ram. Teeth found fabric, then flesh. The man screamed, short, sharp, cut off as he crashed into the mud, blood mixed with rainwater. Voss cursed and pulled the taser from his coat. "Fall back, now!" But the accomplice didn't respond. Only the sounds of snarling, thrashing. Valor had no hesitation, no mercy. Not for this. June grabbed Lena, half carrying her toward the hallway closet. The girl stirred, startled, but didn't cry. June stuffed her inside, whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't come out until I say." She turned just as Voss stepped fully into the kitchen, taser raised. He looked older than the file photo Naomi had shown her once, years ago, after Valor's arrival. But the cruelty in his face hadn't aged. June raised the fire poker. "You're making a mistake," Voss said, calm as winter. "The dog's dangerous. He doesn't belong here." June's voice shook. "Get out. He's government property." "Not anymore," Voss advanced. "Step aside." Then came the sound, not of Valor, of silence, too sudden, too complete. Then a low growl from behind Voss. He turned, and Valor lunged. The taser fired but hit wall. Voss barely ducked in time, Valor's jaws grazing his arm. June swung the poker missed. Voss scrambled back, but not before Valor drove him into the pantry door, splintering wood. The man gasped, stunned. Then finally, sirens. Distant, but growing. Voss looked to the door, then to June. Then he fled, staggering through the side yard, disappearing into the storm, dragging his accomplice's blood trail behind him. In the hallway closet, Lena clutched her shapes. A yellow triangle, a red square. She didn't cry, but she was shaking, until the door creaked open, and Valor stood there, chest heaving, eyes soft, blood on his muzzle, but gentleness in his presence. He laid down in front of her, blocking the world, and Lena reached forward and pressed the yellow triangle into his paw. The first thing Lena noticed was the taste of metal in the air, like a storm that had seeped into the house and refused to leave. The second was the sound, low, not thunder, not wind, a growl, muffled, pained, familiar. And then the crash. Something heavy hit the kitchen floor. Lena jolted upright in the hallway closet, eyes wide. Her galaxy blanket clutched to her chest like a shield. The stars on it, once glowing in the dark, had long since faded. But not for her. For her, they still shone. Outside the door, Valor's growl deepened. But there was something wrong, something different. He sounded slower. breath ragged, like something was pressing down on him from the inside. Hours earlier, June had thought she'd thrown the sedative-laced meat far enough down the trash. But she hadn't counted on Voss returning so soon. She hadn't counted on the accomplice doubling back, on the broken trash lid, on a half-swallowed trap. Now the drug was inside Valor, burning through his bloodstream, fogging his instincts, dulling the fire, but not extinguishing it. The back door burst open again. This time, Voss wasn't alone. A second man came in, bulkier, face-masked, holding a tranquilizer gun with military precision. Not a junkie, not a low-rent thug. This one knew what Valor used to be, and how to neutralize him. But they'd made one mistake. They thought a sedated dog meant a defenseless house. Valor struggled to stand. His legs trembled. His vision blurred, white at the edges. But the moment he saw Voss reach for the hallway that led to Lena, his body surged forward on instinct alone. He hit the first man like a freight train made of muscle and memory. The syringe flew from the man's hand, skidding across the tile. They tumbled into the kitchen table, chairs collapsing beneath them. Voss shouted something inaudible over the sound of teeth snapping, wood cracking, growls reverberating off linoleum. The second man pulled his tranq gun, aimed, fired. The dart hit Valor in the side. He yelped, but didn't fall, didn't yield. Instead, he turned his eyes toward the hallway. Lena heard every second. She buried her head beneath her blanket, whispering to the fabric, "Good boy. Good boy, good boy." Her little fingers gripped a tiny patch sewn at the corner, an old fray Naomi had tried to stitch months ago. A shooting star. She pressed her forehead to it, as if praying. Blood smeared the floor now. Not all of it Valor's. Voss cursed, stepping over his groaning accomplice. "Put the dog down!" he snapped. The man tried, fired again, but the second dart missed. And that was the last mistake he made. Valor rose, staggering, foam at his mouth, legs shaking like wet tree limbs, but his eyes still locked on the hallway, never left. He bolted, crashing through Voss like a storm front. Shoulder met ribcage cracked. Voss screamed, hands slamming into the wall. Valor collapsed halfway down the hall, tried to rise, collapsed again. Inside the closet, Lena opened the door a crack. She saw him there, her protector, her guardian, struggling just to breathe. "Valor," she whispered, a sound barely formed, a word formed only from love. He turned his head slightly, met her eyes. He wagged his tail once, then stood. One more time. Voss stumbled to his feet, blood trickling from his lip. "Enough," he hissed. "You should have died at that compound." He pulled a small black baton from his coat electric, designed for riot control, or creatures like Valor. He stepped toward the closet. Lena whimpered. Valor growled, even drugged, even dying. He would not let that man take her. The final charge was slower than the first, but it was enough. Valor lunged straight into the baton. The shock sent volts through his spine. He screamed a horrifying, guttural sound that froze the air. But he didn't stop. He bit down on Voss's wrist hard. The baton dropped. Voss howled, stumbled back, trying to shake him off. But Valor held, even as his back legs gave out, even as his breath came in ragged heaves. He held. Long enough for the front door to explode open. Red and blue lights filled the room like lightning from another realm. Uniforms poured in. "Drop it! Hands up! Step away from the dog! Get that kid!" June's voice. "In here! She's in here!" Voss froze, eyes darted. Then he dropped to his knees, arms raised. too late for anything else, too late to undo the damage, too late to escape the storm he had summoned. Lena stumbled from the closet. Valor collapsed into her lap, his breathing shallow, but his eyes still open, still watching. She laid her galaxy blanket over him, carefully. Her tiny hand rested on his head. She whispered, "Stay." The silence that followed was worse than the noise. No more growls, no more shouting, no more crashes of broken furniture or barked commands, just a thin whimper, like wind caught between walls. Lena stayed frozen beneath the blanket, the stars on its fabric now soaked with heat and fear. And then she heard it, a scrape. Not loud, but near. The sound of claws one dragging. She peeked through the slit of the closet door, her heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. There. A silhouette in the dark hallway, staggering, bleeding. Valor! The big shepherd was moving toward her, one paw dragging behind him. His fur was matted with red, his mouth hung open, drool thick with exhaustion. He swayed like a branch in wind too strong, but his eyes were locked on her, still guarding, still watching. Even now, Lena pushed the closet door fully open. Her knees trembled. She didn't know how she moved, only that she had to. Tiny feet stepped onto the blood-smeared tile, cold, slippery. Her breath shook with every step. She dropped to her knees beside him. "Valor," she whispered. The dog whimpered, pressing his head gently against her chest like an apology. His body shuddered. She didn't know what to do. But she remembered the phone. On the table by the couch, Naomi's phone glowed faint blue. Its screen cracked slightly from the earlier commotion. Missed calls. A flickering lock screen photo. Lena holding a juice box. Naomi laughing beside her. Lena crawled forward, Valor's blood smearing against her arms, her pajamas. She reached, fingers trembling. Picked it up. The lock screen slid away with a simple swipe Naomi had shown her many times. Favorites. Top of the list. 911. Pre-programmed. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then pressed. It rang. Once. Twice. Click. 911. What's your emergency? The voice was calm, firm, a grown-up voice. Lena's mouth opened. Nothing came. Her lips moved, but the sound caught in her throat. She looked at Valor, at the spreading stain beneath him, at the open back door. Then she did something she hadn't done in months. She spoke. "Help," she said. Barely more than a whisper, but clear, fragile and brave all at once. The operator paused, then gently, "Sweetheart, are you safe? Are you hurt?" Lena's hand clutched Valor's fur. "He's bleeding," she said. "He saved me." "Where are you right now?" "Mommy's house," she said. "The stars are broken." There was a pause, then a softened voice again. "What's your name, honey?" "Lena." Another breath. She steadied herself. "Please, come fast," she whispered. "He's a good boy." Outside, sirens bloomed, distant at first, then nearer, like thunder being reeled in. Lena stayed by Valor's side, one hand pressing gently on the wound at his side, the other still holding the phone. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just stayed, just like he had. Until the lights came, until the voices called, until hands lifted her, wrapped her in warm fabric, until someone promised Valor would be okay. But even as they pulled her gently away, She didn't let go of him completely. Not until someone in uniform whispered, "We'll take care of him. You did the right thing." Only then did her grip loosen. Only then did she finally cry. The phone crackled in Lena's trembling hand. The 911 dispatcher's voice was still in her ear, steady, soft, as if afraid to speak too loud and break the moment. "You're doing so good, Lena. Just keep talking to me, okay? Are you still with your dog?" She looked at Valor, barely breathing now. His sides rose shallow. His ear twitched when she whispered his name, but he couldn't lift his head. The blood beneath him had turned darker, sticky, a halo of loyalty. Lena's voice came out before she had time to think. "They're hurting my friend." It wasn't a whisper this time. It wasn't a murmur caught in the corner of her lips. It was a sentence whole, trembling, but real, a full thought. 6 months of silence cracked open in 5 words. The dispatcher didn't respond right away. When she did, her tone had changed. There was reverence in it now, a hush, like watching dawn break. "Lena, did someone hurt your friend?" She nodded, then remembered the voice couldn't see her. "Yes," she said. "A man. 2 men. They broke the back door. He tried to stop them. They made him bleed." "You're very brave for telling me, Lena. We've already sent officers and an ambulance. They're almost there. Can you stay where it's safe?" Lena looked at the doorway. It was empty now. She had heard them run after Valor lunged, after the screams, after glass shattered and someone yelled, "Abort!" "They left," she said, voice barely more than breath. "He chased them." Then softer, "I think he saved me." There was silence on the line, just for a beat. Not from her. From the dispatcher. Like even they needed a moment. "Lena, how old are you?" 6. "You did the right thing, sweetheart. You're so strong. Can you do one more thing for me?" Lena sniffed, eyes burning. "What?" "Put your hand back on your dog's side. Tell me if he's still breathing." She did. A faint rise and fall. A gasp that wasn't quite a breath. "He is," she said, her fingers trembling where they rested against the torn fur. "But not good." "Okay, that's okay. They're minutes away. Can you tell him he's not alone?" Lena leaned down, forehead pressed against Valor's chest, feeling the slow thud of a heart that refused to quit. "You're not alone," she whispered. "I'm here. I'm here, Valor." Outside, the world began to stir. Sirens crescendoed closer. Lights flickered through the window slats like angry fireflies. Tires screeched on asphalt. Voices rose. Then came the pounding on the front door. "Police! Open up!" The dispatcher's voice returned. "Lena, the officers are there now. Can you get to the front door, or is it locked?" She looked up, tried to rise, but her legs folded under her. "I can't." "That's okay. Stay with your friend. They'll come in. They're trained to help." And then, just like that, the front door burst open. Shouts, boots, flashlights. A second later, a beam of light swept into the hallway, finding Lena's small frame hunched over Valor's body. "Got her!" a voice called. "And the dog! He's alive!" Everything happened fast then, arms around her. Gentle, but urgent. Paramedics crowding over Valor, cutting gauze, applying pressure. Someone shouting about vitals, about blood loss, about stabilizing. Through it all, Lena didn't speak again. She didn't need to. She had already said the most important thing. "They're hurting my friend." And the world had answered. The neighborhood never heard such silence after such noise. It had been shattered violently by screams, glass, barking, and the primal collision of bodies. But now everything seemed to hold its breath. Until the flashing lights came. Red, blue, white. They spilled across the driveway like a warning and a prayer all at once. Squad cars screeched in, one after another. Uniforms poured out like a tide of trained urgency. Go, go, go! 3 officers moved in through the shattered front. 2 circled the back, weapons drawn, voices clipped and firm. Then came the shout. We have movement in the alley. 2 suspects fleeing on foot. A second flashed like lightning over asphalt, then boots thundered. One officer spotted them first. Calder Voss and the younger man, sweat-drenched and bloodied, scaling a neighbor's fence. On the ground, now! But Voss turned. His face was flushed with rage. Not fear, not desperation, rage. And underneath it, something twisted, satisfaction, like he still thought he'd won. He reached into his jacket, but he never made it. A tackle from behind leveled him into the gravel with a crack that echoed off every house on the street. His accomplice stumbled, tried to run again, but slipped in wet grass, face planting into a hedge as a baton pinned him down. Cuffs clicked, adrenaline surged, and for a moment the world spun in place. Inside the house, valor finally let go. The pain was a fog that had dulled his vision hours ago, but the moment he heard Lena's voice, that soft, trembling whisper through the chaos, he'd anchored himself. He'd fought. Despite the weight in his limbs, the sedative, the blood loss. But now it was safe. She was safe. He staggered once toward the living room, then crumpled, paws folding, body limp. An officer knelt beside him. He's still breathing, he called out. Barely, but we need a vet now. One of the EMTs leaned down beside the officer, phone already dialing. A few miles away, Naomi was wrist-deep in a child's chest cavity. The OR was cold, focused. Every sound was vital. Every second mattered. Her eyes didn't leave the monitor. Not until the door burst open. Dr. Patel! Her head jerked up. A surgical tech stood in the frame, breathless, eyes wide. There's been an incident. You're home. Naomi froze. The room blurred around her. What? Police, medics, they're on scene. I think it's your daughter. No air. For half a second, Naomi's heart didn't beat. Then, I'm scrubbing out. But I'm scrubbing out, she snapped. The surgeon beside her nodded. We'll take it from here. In seconds, Naomi stripped the gloves from her hands, ripped off the gown, and pushed through the swinging doors with nothing but panic propelling her. She didn't even change, just grabbed her phone and ran. By the time she reached the end of her block, the whole cul-de-sac was glowing with police lights. She nearly crashed the car pulling in. The second her door slammed, she was sprinting. "Lena!" she screamed. "Valor!" An officer stopped her at the caution tape. "Ma'am, you can't—" "I'm Dr. Naomi Patel. This is my house." The officer blinked. Then recognition dawned. "She's inside. Your daughter's safe. She's a hero." But Naomi was already running. Through her own front door, through the remains of her living room where glass littered the rug and muddy footprints told a violent story. And then she saw them. Lena, wrapped in a blanket, in the arms of a paramedic, eyes wide but dry now, brave in the way only children can be. "Mommy," she whispered. Naomi collapsed to her knees, arms already reaching. "Baby, oh God, baby, are you okay?" Lena nodded. "They hurt, Valor." Naomi turned and saw him, laid out on the floor like a monument, his fur soaked with blood, his eyes half-lidded, but his chest, thank God, still moved, slow but steady. A vet was crouched beside him now, whispering something about internal bleeding, sedatives, urgent surgery. But Naomi didn't hear any of it. She only saw one thing: her daughter's face pressed to Valor's neck, her lips whispering again and again, "You're okay. You're okay. I'm here." And Naomi knew, in that instant, that she owed everything to the dog lying broken in front of her. Everything. The ICU was silent. Not the usual hum of machines or muffled laughter behind masks, just stillness. Lena lay curled beneath her galaxy blanket, eyes open, but empty. Across the hall, Valor lay sedated, tubes in his side, stitches on his ear, chest rising slow and shallow. Naomi hadn't slept, not since the scans, not since the words "miracle" whispered in hushed tones. She didn't want a miracle. She wanted time. A voice returned, a tail wag, something ordinary, something real. Without asking, Naomi wheeled Valor bandaged, fragile down the hallway and into Lena's room. Nurses paused. No one stopped her. Some rules weren't meant to be followed. Lena stirred as the door opened. Her eyes widened. "Valor?" The word escaped like a breath she'd forgotten to hold. He lifted his head, trembled, but stood. Naomi guided him to her side. Lena reached out, touched her forehead to his. He whined, soft, apologetic, and laid his chin on her legs. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since it happened, slept. The first letter arrived days later, a crayon drawing from a neighbor boy. "We were wrong. Thank you for saving Lena." Then came more cards, toys, even a badge reading, "Valor the Brave." The building that once whispered about the aggressive dog in 4B began to change. A local news clip aired, "A retired canine saved a child during a break-in. He was once considered too dangerous. Now he's a hero." Within hours, Valor had a shrine in the lobby. One sign glittered, "Thank you, Valor." When Valor came home stitched, slow, he paused at the door, sniffed the air, then stepped inside. Cautious. Home. Later, Lena sat beside him on the couch. "You don't have to protect me all the time," she whispered. "But I know you will." Naomi watched from the hall, heart aching. That evening, a neighbor came by with banana bread. "For Valor, too," she said. "He reminded us what real courage looks like." And taped to the door, one final note. "Some heroes wear vests, some wear fur. We're lucky he chose us." Then the trial came. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, something deeper. Voss sat up front. Clean suit. Clean hands. As if nothing happened. "Not guilty," he said, confident. Outside, reporters swarmed. "Will Lena testify?" Naomi said nothing. Truth needed space. Lena had already given the world too much. That night, Lena traced stars on a napkin. "They said I might have to sit alone," she whispered. "No Valor. No you." "You don't have to," Naomi said. "But if you do, it could stop him from hurting someone else." Lena leaned into Valor's fur, didn't speak, just breathed. Later, a letter came from the Office of Victim Advocacy. It offered support, preparation, options. "Will you be there?" Lena asked. "Every second," Naomi replied. Lena nodded. "Then I'll tell them what he did." And for the first time in weeks, Valor slept soundly. The therapy room smelled faintly of lavender and wood. No clocks, no harsh lights, just the soft glow of a lamp and a table scattered with crayons. Lena sat curled in a beanbag, wrapped in her galaxy blanket. Valor lay beside her, unmoving except for the rise and fall of his breath. He was still recovering bandages on one leg, stitches beneath fur, but he hadn't flinched when Lena rested her head on him. He just stayed, and so did she. Elsie, the therapist, didn't push. She colored. A sun. A house that looked like Lena's. Days passed like that. Then one afternoon, Elsie asked softly, "Can I ask you something?" Lena didn't speak, but she didn't run. "That night, when you were alone, what did Valor do?" Lena looked at the dog, tapped once on his shoulder. "Here." "You don't have to use words," Elsie said gently. "You can let him speak for you." And so they practiced. Not testimony, not pressure, just courage. Elsie used index cards, pictures of windows, stars, dark hallways. Lena didn't explain them. She just leaned into Valor. Sometimes she hugged him tightly. Once she laid her hand over his heart. "What are you saying to him?" Still looking at Valor, Lena whispered, "Don't leave me." In the mock courtroom down the hall, Lena practiced walking to the stand. Valor was always at her side. At first she said nothing. But one day, when asked what happened after she hid in the closet, Lena whispered, "Valor was bleeding." Elsie held still. "I opened the phone. I said he was hurt. I said they were hurting my friend." It was the same sentence she'd once spoken into a 911 call, the first full sentence in months. But this time, she was standing. That night, Valor curled by her feet as Lena lay beneath her galaxy blanket. "Do you think they'll believe me?" Naomi brushed hair from her forehead. "I would believe you 1,000 times, even if you never said a word." Lena reached for Valor's paw. "We'll do it together," she whispered. The real courtroom was plain cream walls, low ceilings, creaky benches. Outside it rained steadily. At 9:01 a.m. Lena entered. No blanket, just a small plush dog in her arms, gray, floppy-eared, with a badge on its collar. Canine Unit, a toy version of Valor. She didn't look at the man in the suit, just walked to the witness box, climbed up slowly, and hugged the toy. The judge leaned forward. "Just speak when you're ready." The prosecutor began gently. "Who is Valor?" "He's my friend," Lena whispered. "And what did he do the night the man came?" "He got hurt." Then came the defense. He spoke with the polished rhythm of someone used to winning. "You like dogs?" he asked, nodding at her toy. No answer. "You say you saw my client?" "Because the evidence doesn't." He stepped closer. "Tell me, Lena, were you sure? Or were you just scared?" Naomi tensed. Elsie did too. But Lena turned. Not to the lawyer, not to the judge, to the jury. She placed her toy on the rail, straightened her back. "I wasn't scared until he hurt Valor." Silence. "He said bad things. He kicked Valor. He had something metal. It hurt his leg, but Valor didn't stop. He saved me." Her voice cracked but didn't break. "He bled next to the closet. I held his head and told him not to go. I called 911. I said they were hurting my friend." She looked at the judge. "I remember everything." No one moved. Not the jury, not the lawyer, not Voss. A little girl had just handed truth to the room like a star from the dark. As they exited, Naomi knelt. "You didn't have to be perfect." Lena looked up. "I didn't want to be. I just wanted them to know." Outside the courthouse, the real Valor waited, tail thumping softly, eyes locked on the door. They asked Lena to return once more. The courtroom felt lighter this time. The storm had passed, but the truth needed a final anchor. She took the stand alone, plush toy in hand. No prompting, just silence. Then, "When I came to Naomi's, I didn't talk. Not because I couldn't. I just didn't think anyone wanted to hear me." A pause. "But then he came." She looked at the toy in her lap. "He didn't try to fix me. He just sat, put his head in my lap, waited." Her voice shook. "And I knew he saw me." A tear rolled down her cheek. She let it. "When the bad man came, Valor stood between me and the door. He didn't bark for help. He just stayed. He's my best friend." That was all. The courtroom was still. And 27 minutes later, the verdict came. Guilty on every count. No cheers, no gasps, just a girl kneeling beside her dog. She wrapped her arms around Valor's thick neck. "We did it," she whispered. Outside, sunlight cut through the clouds. The city didn't feel heavy anymore. Lena turned to Naomi. "Can we go home?" Naomi smiled, eyes full of tears. "Yes, sweetheart, we can finally go home." It wasn't the grandest stage, but it didn't need to be. The city park's gazebo had been strung with blue and gold banners, folding chairs lined up in neat rows, and a podium dusted off for the mayor's use. But no one was looking at the decorations. All eyes were on the black and tan German shepherd sitting patiently in the center aisle, chest tall, left hind leg still favoring the healing wound. Valor, the hero no one expected, the one no one forgot. Naomi sat in the front row, hands clasped tight in her lap. She wore her hospital scrubs under a blazer she'd come straight from a night shift. There were still lines of exhaustion beneath her eyes, but today her face held something else. Pride, gratitude, a kind of quiet reverence. Beside her, Lena held a small bouquet of hand-picked daisies, fingers brushing the petals with the same gentleness she once reserved for silence. Her toy Valor sat in her lap, threadbare but never far from reach. When the mayor stepped up to the podium, applause rippled through the crowd. The woman smiled, then leaned toward the microphone. "Today," she began, "we gather to recognize not just an act of bravery, but a bond. A bond between a girl who found her voice, a doctor who gave her shelter, and a retired police dog who never forgot how to protect." She paused, glancing down at her notes, though it was clear she didn't need them. When Officer Valor, retired from service, was first placed with Dr. Naomi Brooks, no one could have predicted the journey ahead, least of all the child he would later shield with his own body. He wasn't required to intervene that night. He could have backed away, but instead he stood his ground. He defended, he endured, he refused to fall. The mayor's voice faltered for a moment, emotion catching in her throat. She cleared it gently. Because of his courage, a child was saved, a criminal was brought to justice, and a community was reminded that heroism doesn't always come in uniform. It sometimes walks on 4 legs. The crowd stood to applaud. Naomi blinked quickly. One tear escaped. She didn't wipe it. "It is with great honor," the mayor continued, "that we bestow upon Valor the Civic Medal of Bravery. And furthermore, in recognition of his service to both law enforcement and to this city's children, we declare Valor an honorary service dog for life." Cheers rose, echoing off the trees. An officer in dress blues approached, medal in hand. Valor didn't flinch. He held his position as the ribbon was carefully placed around his neck. The medal, a silver star with blue enamel edges, rested just beneath his collar, shining in the morning sun. Cameras clicked. Lena let out a soft gasp. Naomi exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. The mayor crouched to Valor's level and extended a hand. Valor, ever composed, sniffed gently, then nudged her palm with his nose. The gesture sent another round of applause through the crowd, but this time softer, more reverent, a kind of collective understanding. This wasn't just for Valor. It was for second chances, for trust, for all the things that couldn't be pinned to a uniform. After the ceremony, people lined up to offer their thanks. Children clutched drawings of Valor with capes and crowns. One woman from the neighborhood committee brought a handmade dog treat with his name iced in peanut butter. Even Officer Delgado from Valor's old precinct knelt beside him and whispered, "Still got it, partner." Naomi knelt too. She looked him in the eyes, those same amber eyes that once scanned shadows in alleyways, now reflecting nothing but stillness. "You saved her," she said. "You saved us." Valor didn't move. He didn't need to. His presence alone said everything. Lena came forward then, stepping close. She gently touched the medal, then looked up at Naomi. "Does this mean he's famous?" Naomi laughed, voice cracking. "Yeah, honey," she said. "I think it means he's a legend." Lena nodded solemnly. "He already was. Now everyone just knows it." Later, as the sun dipped low, the crowd thinned. Valor rested beneath the gazebo, finally off duty. Naomi sat beside him, arm draped over his back, eyes closed for just a moment. And Lena, curled at his side, humming under her breath, a soft, tuneless melody only he seemed to understand. Somewhere, distant church bells rang. But here, in this quiet corner of the city, it was already holy. The ballroom of St. Clair's Children's Hospital was awash in soft gold light and pastel tablecloths. Paper butterflies dangled from the ceiling, each one hand-decorated by a child in recovery. At the far end of the room stood a small stage, modest but proud, framed by a banner that read, "Voices of Courage, Fundraiser Gala." It was a celebration of healing, of stories, of second chances. But no one expected the smallest voice in the room would carry the biggest weight. Naomi stood backstage, adjusting the sleeves of Lena's navy blue dress. Her hands were trembling more than the girls. "You sure?" Naomi asked gently. Lena nodded. Her curls had been brushed back, a clip shaped like a little star holding one side in place. But her fingers clutched something tighter than the microphone. A fabric scrap of her galaxy blanket, now sewn into a heart and tucked inside her palm. Sitting just off stage, Valor watched with quiet focus. His medal rested across his chest. He didn't blink. The MC stepped forward. "Our next guest is someone whose story reminded us that even when you lose your voice, your courage never leaves you. Please welcome Miss Lena Brooks." Applause rippled softly as Lena stepped forward. She was tiny against the podium. The mic had to be lowered twice. Silence fell, the kind of silence that trembles with hope. Lena looked out at the crowd, dozens of unfamiliar eyes, some kind, some misty. She took a breath, then another. Her voice, when it came, was soft and fragile, like a bird landing on open hands. But it didn't shake. "Hi, my name is Lena. I'm 10. A quiet smile ghosted across her lips. For a long time, I didn't talk, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how to say the things inside. I was scared a lot, of people, of sounds, of being hurt again. Then Valor came. The crowd stilled further. He didn't talk either, but he listened, with his eyes. Lena glanced off stage for just a heartbeat. Valor's ears perked up slightly. He never asked me questions I couldn't answer. He just stayed. And one night, when it was really scary, he didn't run. He stayed again. And after that night, something in me changed. She swallowed. The galaxy heart in her palm pulsed with pressure. He taught me how to be brave, even if no one claps, even if your knees shake. He taught me that you don't need words to protect someone. But sometimes, words can protect someone too. A long pause. Even the photographers were still. Then, her voice, barely above a whisper, but clear enough to cut through the hush. "That's why I'm here. To raise money so kids like me can have someone like him. Or someone like you. Someone who stays." The room rose, not with thunderous applause, but with something gentler. People stood not to celebrate, but to honor, to thank. Naomi's eyes blurred with tears she didn't wipe away. Valor let out a soft chuff of air, the kind only Naomi recognized as approval. The gala continued, but the speech lingered. It would be replayed, reprinted, reshared. But none of that mattered to Lena, because when she stepped down from the podium, Valor was waiting. He stood, steady and tall, and bowed his head just enough to let her wrap her arms around his neck. She leaned in, whispering into his fur words for him alone. "We did it." He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He never had. The sun warmed the backyard in soft golden layers, like a quilt stitched by summer itself. Dandelions swayed in lazy rhythm with the breeze. The grass had finally grown back after the chaos green and forgiving. Lena sat cross-legged on a blanket spread across the lawn, a chapter book open in her lap. The corners of the pages fluttered as she read, voice soft but steady. And the fox said, "What is essential is invisible to the eye." Her words floated like petals, not meant for any audience except the one dozing beside her. Valor lay with his head on his paws, his breathing deep and even. One ear twitched occasionally at a squirrel's rustle or a bird's chatter, but he didn't move. Not really. He didn't have to. He was where he belonged. His fur shimmered faintly in the light, still marked by scars, still stiff in the back leg where a bullet had passed through months ago. But he no longer winced, no longer limped. The pain, like the worst memories, had softened, become part of the story without defining it. Lina reached out and rested her hand lightly on his side. He didn't stir, but his tail gave one small thump. That was enough. Naomi stood at the kitchen window, a mug in hand, watching the two from a distance she didn't need anymore. The lines on her face had begun to smooth fewer creases from sleepless nights, fewer shadows beneath her eyes. She looked younger today, though nothing had changed except the weight that had quietly slipped off her chest. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath for months, maybe longer. Now she exhaled and smiled, Not the kind that masks worry, but the kind that says, "We're okay." Later, Lena rolled onto her back, staring up at the clouds. "That one looks like a dragon," she whispered. Valor opened one eye. "And that one, kind of like you, but with wings." His tail gave another lazy wag. She giggled, then propped herself up on her elbows. "Want to hear more?" He didn't answer, of course. But he didn't walk away, either. She picked up the book again, her finger finding the sentence where she'd left off. Inside, Naomi hung a new picture on the wall above the fireplace. It wasn't fancy, just a candid Polaroid someone had taken at the hospital. Lena asleep, Valor curled at her feet, the galaxy blanket draped over them both. Underneath it, Naomi had written in careful black ink, "Valor didn't retire. He just changed assignments, from saving lives to saving hearts." Sometimes the most heroic endings don't come with sirens or medals. Sometimes they sound like a child learning to read again, or laughter echoing down a sunlit hallway, or the soft thud of a tail on grass. Because peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of someone who stays. In the quiet strength of a dog's loyalty, we are reminded of the best parts of ourselves: courage, compassion, and unwavering love. Valor's journey wasn't just about saving lives. It was about healing hearts, breaking silence, and showing us that heroes come in many forms, some with 4 legs and a beating heart full of devotion. German shepherds like Valor embody more than intelligence or strength. They are guardians of our trust, protectors of our most vulnerable, and silent witnesses to moments of transformation. Through their loyalty, we rediscover hope. Through their presence, we find the bravery to speak, to heal, and to begin again. This story is a celebration of the bond between humans and animals, a bond that asks for nothing but gives everything. It calls us to love more deeply, to listen more quietly, and to see beyond fear into the kind of love that changes lives. If you've ever doubted the power of kindness, look into the eyes of a dog who's never left your side. That's where you'll find the truth. Sometimes, love doesn't need words. It just needs to stay. Let's honor that kind of love with our care, our choices, and our voice.